of emails from the account of Hillary Clinton's campaign chief, shedding light on why her team has been focusing so heavily on Russian President Vladimir Putin. Well, for more on this story, let's now cross live to our correspondent Caleb Maupin in New York City. So this is an email exchange between columnist and Clinton ally Brent Budowsky and campaign chief John Podesta. Could you tell us what is in these messages?
Well, the recently revealed email conversation between a columnist for the U.S. political newspaper The Hill and the chairman of Hillary Clinton's campaign. In this conversation, the Clinton campaign, they're advised to, quote, slaughter the Donald by emphasizing an alleged relationship between Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. The term actually used in the emails is bromance. Now, furthermore, the emails make reference to a need for 20,000 foreign troops in Syria, 3,000 of which would be American troops. Let's take a listen to what was said.
Walk back and escape from her statement that finally we are where we need to be against ISIS. We are not where we need to be. We are far from it. Most voters do not believe it. And when the next terror attack comes in America, which it certainly will, she will be branded in hot iron with that statement.
Now, like other previously leaked emails, the new batch of documents sheds light onto what goes on behind closed doors in Hillary Clinton's campaign. There is, of course, no way of verifying, however, if this advice was followed.
Well, thank you so much for this update. That was RT's reporter Caleb Maupin there in New York City. And we can now speak with the journalist involved in that email exchange. Brent Budowsky is a columnist for The Hill and the Huffington Post and an ally to supporter of Hillary Clinton. Well, it's nice to see you here. Thank you and welcome to the program. So to start with, can you actually confirm that these emails are authentic? And if so, what do you think about them being released by WikiLeaks?
Well, first of all, the part about branded with a hot iron is not authentic. I went back and looked at the original email after I saw you segment it an hour ago, and that was not in there. I don't talk that way. I wouldn't say that, and that was not in any of the emails. So whoever added that fabricated that. As far as slaughtering Donald Trump about it, yes, I said that. And the rest of it fundamentally does reflect my point of view. Point number one, and I want to answer the American, I think he was, who was on an hour ago as well. Number one, I believe that Bashar Assad is a war criminal. I believe that Bashar Assad and Putin's Russia are killing many civilians. Most of the civilians killed are killed by them with the bombing in Syria. I've written that in columns. I've said that on television in America. I've said that on RT as recently as 3 or 4 weeks ago. Next, I believe that the espionage directed against the American election by the Russians, which is the opinion of almost everybody in American law enforcement, everybody in American intelligence, almost everybody in Congress that has spoken about it. I think it is a terrible mistake. I think it's a horrible thing to do. And I made the point in that memo that you did quote, the part that was accurate, not the part that was not, and I believe it, that I think it is a terrible political blunder and a terrible foreign policy blunder for Donald Trump to be praising President Putin. I don't think it helps Donald Trump or President Putin to be praising him, and I don't think it helps him to be doing espionage against American election systems, against the American, the leaks, the hacking, and all that, which obviously helps Donald Trump, or they thought it would help Donald Trump. I think it's backfiring. What I also wrote in that memo, that you could see in your screen, it wasn't quoted, but I wrote it, it was in there, is the chances that President Putin supports the removal of Bashar Assad is about equal to the chances that I am invited by the College of Cardinals to be the next pope to succeed Pope Francis. He won't do that. And I was very skeptical of the diplomacy at the UN. I supported it. I wished it would work. I said we should hope it would work. But no, I didn't think it would. Obviously, that was proven correct. I warned against putting too much faith in it. And I just think the whole thing is a major, major mistake by Russia to try to intervene in the American elections. And I've said that again here, RT, American TV, in column after column, and yes, in private emails to Podesta. I'm not a warmonger, but I want to kill ISIS. I don't want to be bombing civilians, as Russia and Syria are, according to almost all international experts who are credible. I think that's wrong. I think it's a mistake. I think it should stop. I would advise any Russians who may be listening to this from the government, U.S. relations with Russia are among the most important relations in the world.
All right,
we need
Mr.
a reset
Budowsky.
From where we are now. That's the problem.
Okay, excuse me for this interruption, but let's just stick to one of these points that you just mentioned, right? You're talking about whether you suggested to send ground troops to Syria or not. Now, in those emails, there is this quote that you did suggest to send ground troops to Syria, including 3,000 American soldiers. Do you know whether Clinton campaign actually agrees with that suggestion, with that offer?
No, they have not. They do not agree with that. What I suggested, and not many people in the U.S. agree with it, is you send a force of up to 20,000 to kill ISIS, not just to Syria, but wherever ISIS is. Most of them should be Europeans and Muslims from the region, and some Americans in a multinational force. What I'd like to see is to go to the United Nations Security Council and make it a UN force under the General Assembly, United for Peace. But that is what I have suggested, not aimed at Syria, but aimed at ISIS. And wherever ISIS is. I want to kill ISIS. I don't want to have bombs, whether they're from Russia or Syria or anybody else, killing innocent civilians. What's happening in Aleppo is a moral crime against humanity. It is a war crime. It is outrageous. That doesn't make me a war criminal. That makes me a humanitarian. The real war criminals are the people dropping the bombs. And I do think, that they need to have a diplomatic solution, and they need to stop the killing and the carnage. I do think we need some ground troops more. That is my personal opinion. That advice has not been taken by too many people in the U.S. right now. Not a huge force, but 20,000, and a small component of that would be American, because we can't ask Europeans and Middle East countries to participate if we won't do any. So I think we need a little more than we have right now, a total of 20,000. But I opposed the original Iraq war from the beginning, and I knew about it before most Americans did.
Right.
But I think we have to do more against ISIS. Killing civilians and bombing civilians in Aleppo or in Syria with Russian bombs, Syrian bombs, or any bombs from anyone is wrong, bad policy, immoral, a war crime, and should stop.
Let me just quickly, just add. You have Iraq, you have Afghanistan, right? And it is a security disaster there that followed U.S. ground interventions. Why do you think it will work for Syria?
Well, I think what we need is a true, supported by Putin and America, a true diplomatic initiative that would be more effective than what we did, that the Russians join the Americans in support to stop the killing and the carnage in Aleppo and other places. And we need some force, ground force, that is more multinational, including some U.S., but not most, to kill ISIS. I think that's what we need to do. And basically, I view that as a humanitarian. I opposed the Iraq war from the beginning in the United States when George W. Bush tried to do it. But the fact is, it is the opinion of most outside experts, which is what I have advised everybody. And I write columns read by everybody in Congress and the White House, not just John Podesta. I think the current policy needs to be somewhat changed. I think there has been progress from Obama. We're seeing the battle for Mosul. I hope it goes well. But we have to stop the bloodshed and the killing in Aleppo. It is a crime against humanity. It must stop now. We need a safe zone for refugees where they can get food and medicine and humanitarian assistance. That's what I'm for.
True that, Mr. Budowsky, true that. At the moment, currently, Russia and Syria have indeed introduced a ceasefire on the Syrian territory. Now, Just another question here. In the email conversation with Clinton campaign chief John Podesta, you say Clinton needs to distance herself from the Obama strategy, and your exact words are, quote, as for ISIS, the mathematically worst place for her to be is co-owner of the Obama-Clinton policy. But in reality, doesn't she really co-own it already at the moment? She was Secretary of State until February 2013. Doesn't she really co-own it, the strategy?
Well, I think she's calling for some changes, and she's calling for many things to continue. So she's somewhere in the middle on that. My point is to advocate what I think is right, without worrying about how you label it. I was worried when too many people thought that the UN negotiations would succeed. I didn't think they were. I supported them. I hoped they would succeed. But again, as I wrote, memo to Russia here, as I wrote in that memo, the chances that President Putin would want President Assad to leave are about the same as the College of Cardinals in Rome would invite me to become the next pope. And don't sit by the phone for that to happen. I wish I were wrong. I hope tomorrow I'm proven wrong and President Putin supports a diplomatic initiative that would remove Assad. Assad is a major war criminal. And I can't imagine why President Putin wouldn't make the humanitarian and diplomatic move to join with us and with others to replace him with a government in Syria that represents all of the groups, all of the factions. That's where I come down, and I think it's a mistake to say anything else. Now, I'm not going to say on the other issues that she took my advice or not, but when I said that it was the right move to slaughter Donald Trump for praising Putin, for supporting many of Putin's policies, politically, I was right. President Putin's popularity in the United States is about 8% on a good day. You don't want to be a Republican nominee, as Trump is, praising that. That's a bad political move. And I said so. I wrote it. I wasn't the only one saying that. And yes, that position is the position right now. And I think Donald Trump, who, in my view, is totally unqualified to be president, is a very dangerous man. And I think his views on Russia are part of the danger. Now, I would ask, if I don't expect President Putin to call me for advice, but if he did, I would have his people that analyze Trump to say, what would Trump do to Russia if President Putin, instead of praising him, ever attacks him? Because the fact is, Trump is a dangerous and reckless person with a very hot temper, and he would react against Putin then the same way he reacts against anybody else that criticizes him.
All right.
And if that ever happens, we could have World War III because of Putin. So I don't think it's a very smart diplomatic or military move for Russia to do anything to make him elected. I just think that's a bad move for everybody. And it won't happen. He's going to lose.
Okay, well, let's hope that there's never going to be a World War III anytime soon or ever. Let's go back to Clinton's position on ISIL now. We've been discussing that just 2 minutes ago. Now, you wrote that Clinton's position on ISIL was only good enough if there would be no terrorist attack on American soil before November. Now, my question is, what did you actually mean by that? What would change after the elections? If you ever said that.
Well, I think I do think, and I wrote and have said this, at some point there will be more terror attacks against America and in Europe. And I think that will make the public angry at just about everybody. I don't think Donald Trump has a policy to do it. You can't get him to say what he would do. Mostly slogans that don't make any sense. But
do you think that Hillary Clinton actually have a policy if such an attack happened, or how to prevent such an attack?
Well, I don't think anybody has the ultimate policy. I think she's far better than Trump. I agree, by the way, when she says we need a safe zone for refugees so they can stop being killed and they can stop getting sick and they can stop starving. And Syrian refugees can live in dignity and decency with medicine and food and humanitarian aid. And I would urge the Russians to agree with that. I think it's in Russia's interest. I don't think it's in Russia's interest to be looking like they're propping up Assad, a war criminal, supporting Donald Trump, who's a clown, and letting the carnage go on while Russian and Syrian bombs continue to fall. I'm glad there is at least a short-term ceasefire. I hope it is extended. I think in Secretary of State John Kerry, you have someone who wants to look out for the people in a responsible and reasonable way. And I'd suggest working with him. But when he meets with Lavrov, nothing happens and the bombs continue. It's bad for Russia, bad for Syria, bad for the world. And I would just advise the Russians, I don't write private emails to Vladimir Putin, but if he ever hears this, you should do the responsible thing. Stop trying to affect the American elections. That is going to poison American-Russian relations for a generation. If it
Mr.
continues.
Podowsky, I've got a question.
Assad.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Now, you just mentioned stop affecting American elections, right? Well, let's just go back and talk about this so-called bromance between Trump and Putin, alleged links between the two. Now, in one of the emails, you talked about the so-called bromance. And in the last presidential debate, actually, Donald Trump stressed that he has never even met Putin in his entire life. So does any such bromance actually exist, or is there actually evidence that such a bromance exists, or is it just something that's been played up by the Clinton team?
Oh, no, I think it's true. Now, I'm not suggesting that Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump play golf together or go to bed together when I say bromance. I didn't invent that word. I just used a word that other people have used. But obviously, I don't think it's helpful for an American presidential candidate to be praising a Russian dictator. I'm sorry. I said that. It's true. I don't think it's helpful for a Russian president to be helping to try to elect a Republican as the American president. I don't think that's smart for Russia from a security, political, or moral point of view. U.S.-Russian relations are far too important to be playing these games, okay? I want better U.S.-Russian relations. We need a reset from where we are today. That's what we really need. And I will tell you that if President Putin acts in a way that would promote better relations, sincerely, the United States would respond. That is my best wish. But until then, I'm going to write columns, memos, go on television, go on Russian television, American radio, and tell anyone I know that the status quo as it exists is not acceptable. We cannot have an American president chosen under the influence of a Russian president. It will not happen. Trump is going to lose,
let me just interrupt you here. Again, coming back to the question that I asked you before already, is there actual evidence that there are links between the two, between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin? Everybody's talking about that there are ties, but there's actually nothing being presented as real evidence that there is such a strong, as everybody's talking about, connection between the two. So where is the evidence?
No, the evidence is that the Central Intelligence Agency and American FBI and most intelligence agencies around the world believe, are convinced, are totally convinced that Russia is behind much of the hacking of the emails. Russia is behind attempts to infiltrate American election machines. Even
so we just need to take their word
disagree with Trump about this and agree with me. Excuse me?
So we just need to take their word for
I'm
it.
sorry,
There's nothing being actually shown.
Look, I will tell you right now, we'll see how much influence I have. I have urged the American government to publicly release the proof. Now, for intelligence reasons, as Americans and Russians both understand, they're reluctant to do it. But every single law enforcement and intelligence office and official that has looked at this, not just in the United States, but among our allies that has looked at this, they all believe it's true. The House Speaker, Paul Ryan, who I don't agree with much about anything, he has talked about this. Major Republicans have talked about this. That issue is only disagreed with by Donald Trump, and that's why I think he's doing so badly. Most people don't agree with him about this. There's plenty of evidence,
there is nothing
according
being
to the
published.
law enforcement and Oh, I wish they'd publish all of it. And I understand why they're reluctant to for intelligence reasons. We'll see whether they ultimately do or not. But I will tell you this, when the President of the United States and the Secretary of State and others have said the United States will have an appropriate response at an appropriate time, I suspect it will be soon. I suspect it will be significant. I don't know what it is. I hope it doesn't have to happen. But whether that happens depends on what President Putin orders in Russia. if he takes the kind of advice I'm suggesting to reset relations again in a more positive way in Syria and to stop trying to interfere in our elections, that will have a happy ending for Russia and for America and for anybody. If he continues the bombing of civilians, if the ceasefire stops and with Assad, that's going to be bad for Syria and bad for Russia. That is also going to precipitate more problems with the world community, not just the United States. And the hacking and the attempts to influence the election, that has to stop.
We are running out of time. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks again for being here.